Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation. I'm Gary Williams. I've had a lot of conversations with the gentleman who's going to join me here in a minute, and a lot of them have been on the air. More of them have been just us walking and playing golf. This is somebody who played college golf, has written about the game for decades, and is somebody who came into my life and my career at a time where I didn't know I needed him, but I really did. And I value the friendship immeasurably, but really appreciate all the time I get to talk about the game of golf with him. That is Jaime Diaz of Golf Channel. Our conversation is coming up next. With that, we welcome in the esteemed essayist and thought-provoking man himself, that is Jaime Diaz. How are you, my friend?
I'm great, Gary. Good to see you. Beautiful sweater.
Thank you. Listen, I mentioned in the open that you were a college golfer. Not many people probably know that. I know that there was, a modest level of college golf, but still.
Less than modest.
Well, still.
Immodest. Immodest.
Did you think when you got to the University of San Francisco that eventually you would be good enough to really contribute on your college golf team?
Well, again, it's all relative. They were basically taking walk-ons, but so I just wanted to make the team, and I wanted to be able to sort of make that part of my college life and see if I could get any good. And the reality was I was just marginally obviously talented. You played with me, but at the same time I really didn't have the program was nowhere near as serious as even the best ones of the day. We played against Stanford, and we played against some other schools, San Jose State, that had sophisticated programs where guys didn't graduate because they were trying to be pros. And we were I brought my books out to practice sometimes because I was trying to finish an assignment or something. So it was very much a part-time thing. But at the end of the year, it mattered to us or it mattered to me anyway, the league championship, all that. So everything was just sort of a run-up to 3 or 4 events that mattered. And so it was a great experience as far as, my own level sort of being, I guess, maximized to some extent. At the same time, meaningful events to me that I tried to play well in and got that sort of, intensity and understood, a little bit more about what it takes to be competitive, to be good, to be able to handle a little bit of pressure and all that. So, yeah, it was 4 years though. And it was, I'm very, very happy. It was part of my, second half of every year. And we got to play some great courses, Olympic Club and LA North. We played down there. It wasn't high class at all, but it was, for my level, it was a great privilege. And I'm glad I had it not because it was college golf so much, just because I ran into some really good players that, I remember playing in a tournament with Roger Maltby, and I just missed Tom Watson.
Wow.
Just because of Stanford and a few guys at San Jose State who moved on, Mike Peck and other guys. But I don't know. I've never really been asked about it. It was not, real serious golf for the most part. We tried, but we didn't really prepare with any sort of seriousness. The practices were rare. Most of our practices we just matches, and at the same time. It meant something to me, and I just felt like I want to know what this game's like when you got to just tee it up and count every stroke. And of course, I played junior golf and things, but I started to get an insight, I thought, into people who were going to try to make it their life and what that took.
Well, you're still very feisty on the golf course today. I would have loved to have seen you hitting a faulty shot when you were 20, and seeing the way you reacted to it. That would be vintage.
I remember a guy hold out an eagle at Sharp Park on me, and I threw my bag into the. It was a joking gesture, but everybody talked about it later. I threw my bag into the fairway bunker on the 17th hole. So
I
wouldn't
can
look good on TV.
I can
Yeah.
see it. I can see it. Well, there are probably three things that I'd like to talk with you about. And if we get to all three, great. If we don't, there'll be a next time. But I want to start with what the USGA and the R&A presented last week, because you and I were working together when the Distance Insights report. We went on the air that night. There was a pretty thorough examination, the best we could do at that time, of what we knew. And then subsequently COVID hits, and that, and the advancement of that, for all intents and purposes, gets shelved. So now here we come back around in the late winter of 2023, and we have this proposal of this modified local rule, which is going to have specifically a reduction of distance as it is associated with the golf ball. Were you surprised by this? Not that you might, you were plugged in with everybody. I'm not saying surprised when you saw it. Surprised that they went in this direction. And in general, do you support what they're doing?
Yeah, Gary, I was not, they kept it, I think, under wraps pretty well. There was a lot of speculation. I was surprised they went for the golf ball, because I thought that was the bolder move, and one that perhaps would be more problematic as far as, the public opinion and the reaction of the players and the manufacturers certainly would be more intense, more criticism. And, I think our perception of the USGA the last few years is that they've come under fire so much that their authority is sometimes in question. And as David Fay used to say, we rule by the power not vested in us. It's just sort of a gentleman's agreement that we follow the USGA. So how much criticism can they take and still retain credibility and authority with the people in the game of golf? And I was very heartened that they went for the big game, so to speak, with the ball. I thought it would have been easier to go with the club, and I thought they were hinting toward the club, because the driver, I thought, would be an isolated club, and it's not that hard to take a little COR out of it, and take some of the spring out of it, and maybe make the sweet spot smaller. Although one of the things that, just as an aside, that like Mike Wan was talking about in the research, the tour players hit the very center of the club quite often. It's like more than 90%. And so we talk about these heel hits and everything, and it's just so relative. Yeah, the better player would hit it more often, but it'd be marginally more often. So it wasn't going to make that much difference, at least by their criteria, to deal with the club in terms of the sweet spot. Now, as far as the spring off the club, yes. But if you start doing that, it turns out, well, maybe the 3-wood becomes hotter, relatively speaking, in comparison. And then you have to start going down the line of clubs, all the way down through the hybrids, perhaps. And so then it becomes really impractical. So having said that, and with that knowledge that they gained over the last year or a half or so, that maybe the clubs wasn't the practical way to go, I just thought it was very fortuitous they went with the ball, because to me, and you're a student of sports, the ball is the easiest thing to manage. We see it in tennis. They don't announce what they do in tennis when there may be too many hot serves and they don't want so many aces. They put a little more fuzz on it, all it slows down, the game changes. Certainly baseball, there's been a lot of talk about the ball, but nobody knows exactly who regulates the ball other than the manufacturers of it. The seams get a little higher, or maybe it's a little hotter, it goes out of the park a little faster. You want to regulate home runs, fine. There's no lawsuits that come about because of what the rules makers do to the ball. Nobody endorses baseballs. Nobody endorses tennis balls. Golf has that not intangible, but that extra condition where the players are involved in terms of the money and the manufacturers who pay them. And so that has been the pressure point for the golf ball. But they're going to take it on. And I think, the Distance Insights project created this sort of give and take for a couple of years, and COVID elongated it, that I think really helps the credibility of the USGA, in my mind, long term. Right now they're taking some shots, but I think as people get more educated and sort of familiar with the process, they're going to say, hey, they talked to everybody and they made their decision, trying to please probably no one, but maybe everyone a little bit, which is maybe the best solution. But this really goes back to Jack Nicklaus and others before him. But Jack, he was on this thing exactly as it is, probably 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So and certainly 30 years ago. Not that Jack is, all knowing, never to make a mistake, but I think he knows the game. And I think he, as an architect at the time, he was looking at what were happening to golf courses, especially championship golf courses. So I was very happy about it. And, it's going to be I guess, a war now, a war of words, but I'm glad that the USGA is just doing what they think is best for the game, as they always try to do. I don't see anybody can see an agenda in any of this other than that. Everybody else has got an agenda. Doesn't mean that they're, in some way, tainted. It just means that the USGA is the most, in my opinion, objective source for all this. And to say that they don't know what they've been doing or haven't done the research, to me, doesn't hold water.
No, I think that refrain is lazy. And obviously ill-informed to suggest that they have not done their research. They're experts at what they do. They devote every waking moment to the regulations, the advancement, and the governance of the game. It's what they do. I'm sure at times not very rewarding because there's so much pushback on everything. But let me ask you, it this way, as far as that side of it, the manufacturer side of it, the elite players side of it, the idea of bifurcation. What do you think of the people who oppose this? What has the most merit?
That's a good point. I don't think the bifurcation claim has the most merit, just to dismiss that one, because in my mind anyway, because that's been the most commonly held objection. Okay, it's the model local rule, which is still part of, and this is just technical and semantics, but to me, it's still kind of important. It's still part of the rules of golf. You're not fragmenting the rules of golf to make this happen. You're using something that's already within the rules of golf. It's the model local rule. The other part of it that can be applied by anyone, by any group. Martin Slumbers was talking about club golf using this model local rule. If you have some really, what they consider to be really elite players who want to play by this. Anyone can play these new balls.
Yes.
There's nothing keeping you from doing it. You don't have to bifurcate, quote unquote. If you're a 6 handicap and wants to play with, the PGA Tour players are playing in a model local rule, you can do that. So I just think it just kind of throws bifurcation out. But as far as the best objection, I guess it is, I wouldn't say it's scoring, because scoring hasn't really moved that much. Because there's so many other ways of changing scoring, whether it's growing rough or changing pin positions, hole positions, or green speeds or firmness. There's just a million ways to make a golf course hard, regardless of how long it is. Gosh, that's a good question, Gary. I'm trying to look at it from the player's point of view. I don't think getting accustomed to a new ball after playing, others for so long, it holds a lot of water. Going back, I'm sort of doing process of elimination here, and maybe you can suggest the one that you think, and then we can discuss it. But I remember when, even as a kid, somebody bring back a British ball back from a visit to Scotland or something, and they bring a dozen balls. We all play them. We're just kids, obviously.
Sure.
But the same thing applied to the tour players who went over to play in the Open Championship. They maybe accustomed themselves for a couple of days to the little ball, and actually, enjoy the extra distance, and maybe the more forgiveness that it had off of a miss, and everything was fine. There was nobody going, "Oh, I can't play this ball; it's impossible." Obviously, the American ball was harder to play because it was less forgiving, didn't go as far, but those adjustments were made quite easily. So I don't see that aspect either. But tell me, because I spur my mind a little bit. I'm not having an easy time kind of finding the best objection.
Here's where I think, I would say I have some empathy for this part of it, the financial component. So these ball manufacturers, they all have these economies of scale. They get their ball right, they produce it, they can market it and sell it in mass, and they're very effective at that. And that's great. And now you're going to have this finite subset of players that are going to require this ball. So there's going to be cost associated with that. And you can't, and I'm with you that there will be there's going to be enough people who are going to want to play this, one out of immediate curiosity, but also about the idea of ascending themselves, whether it be elite juniors to the college game and whatever. More than just the top professionals will play this ball, but it's not the type of marketing opportunity that exists with the current balls that we know that we want to play, that the players play. So there is cost in that. And you can say, why do we have to incur all of that? What would you say to that objection?
I would say, and I don't mean to be hardball or unempathetic. I know everybody's running a business. I have a feeling, the top ball manufacturers are not going to lose that much market share. If there is a rollback, there might be a perception that people have been drawn closer together. I think that will shake itself out. What I would say is that any industry in this country or pretty much in the world is regulated. There's government regulation. There's an overseer somewhere, and that overseer makes decisions, and those decisions have overhead and have an effect, and that's the cost of doing business. I mean, you can sue certainly to try to change the regulation, but in general, you have to conform to those regulations, and that's what businesses do, and that's what R&D departments do. And just because there's a lot of geniuses I know over at the ball companies and at the club companies, aerospace, sophisticated type people, NASA's trained, who knows, and their work is really valuable and should be, really something that everybody's proud of. But it doesn't mean that it's irreversible. And people start over and do new things based on the regulations. And I unless those regulations are completely, illogical and unreasonable, and then I think the legal process takes over, which may happen in this case, that somebody thinks this is unreasonable. But if they're not, I just feel like that's what industries do. They adapt, and they're smart enough because they've already done something quite innovative that they can be innovative again. And I just don't think that is such a onerous ask, so to speak, for the manufacturers to have to adapt to what the rules makers of the game think is best for the game. If you lose that trust and you don't think it's best for the game, maybe get new rules makers or don't follow the rules makers. But as long as the USGA and the R&A have credibility and authority, I think that they just should be followed. And if there's a cost involved, unless it's something just earth-shaking, that it doesn't have to be shared. It just those businesses will find their way again to be profitable and to make things work.
I think that, look, the idea of them incurring a cost, I'm with you. I don't think market share is going to be lost. I don't. I do think that, they have to come up with an effective way to make an adjustment to, the mass production of a ball that can be then used by the overwhelming majority of a sport that is participatory. And so, that's something that they're going to have to deal with. But I will say this.
Let me interrupt real quick. I mean, I don't think most players, the most balls bought are the ones, the highest.
Correct.
Highest priced balls. There's a lot of top flights and pinnacles and all those other things we talk about out there. And obviously those balls have gotten better too. But I think, I don't know this for a fact, but I think that the highest selling balls are not the balls being played on the professional tours.
I also think that, and this is natural for anybody, whatever it is, decision gets made and we all say, how's it going to affect me? Understandable. But for everybody who's looking at statistics right now in professional golf, you're missing the point in my estimation. This is not about 2026. This is about 2076. It's about 2100. And it's not easy to be the one who says, you know what, I'm going to leave it to the next guy to take this on. This is not an easy challenge. I think it's a necessary thing to take on. I've tried to examine this as best I can, be pragmatic about it. But I just polled, Jaime, for example, the handful of clubs in Charlotte where I live. One of them hosts a PGA Tour event, that's Quail Hollow.
Yeah.
All of them in the last 15 to 20 years have added between 500 to 800 to 1,000 yards to their golf courses. And you know who pays the freight for that? The members themselves. Yeah. And when is that going to stop? Because in 1997, and I understand this about the elite player, But it's not just about the elite player. We're running out of space. So anything that anybody wants to compare to, well, basketball, baseball, football, there's
Right.
not a sensitivity to the parameters of the playing field. This is a very costly endeavor. Sustainability is not something we associate with the National Football League. It's 100 yards. And these clubs in the town that I live in are adding 5, 8, 10 football fields to their golf courses. It has to stop.
It's a great point. It is the USGA's, I think, underlying point. Now, the immediate is the elite game, which I think that's the one that's most visible. But the most important in terms of golf remaining, viable going forward in the environment is that the sustainability. And I think it's analogous to climate change. And I'm not trying to trivialize climate change, but it is about this creep that's happening, that it's not affecting us today. But what kind of world are we going to leave? And what kind of golf world are we going to leave? I think that's the USGA's job. That's the R&A's job. And that's really not a popular decision. And it takes some foresight. But if you really care about the game, I mean, I think it's sort of incumbent to look at really what do we love about it? And is the thing we love about it the most hitting it the farthest we can? I mean, there's so many other elements to it. If there's a small sacrifice in distance, and I'm talking about for the average player, and there hasn't been, obviously, a rollback. He has not been affected by this. It's just such a small price to pay, to keep the game viable, to keep golf course from going broke, from keeping the green fees from going up to where it's not accessible. I think one of the most important things about golf is that people can, of very modest means, lower income people can go play it. And the more expensive it gets, the less the more it becomes a 1%er game. It's already happening, I think, too much. The people who really move the needle in golf, that sustain golf, that pay for golf, that keep it a really important business with the equipment makers, with the private clubs and the high-end public clubs are wealthy people. And I just want to see, it just spread across, because I just think the game's so much better. I mean, I come from San Francisco, not to idealize, one place, but that was a place where golf was really blue collar. And as a result, it has remained part of the culture there with the public courses. And it's a battle to keep that going. But I just think it makes the game so much better. It makes it America's game. It's not totally America's game. Obviously, football and baseball are bigger. But as far as participatory, I think golf it has become, and I hope it sustains itself as America's game.
All right, let's transition to something that recently was announced, and this is going back 10 days, but this is going to be an evolving thing, and that is the way the PGA Tour is going to present itself in 2024 and beyond. What was your initial reaction to this designated series, which is going to be essentially kind of what they've done this year, kind of on the fly, but in a more modest size fields with no cuts? Do you like what they're doing here?
Well, I thought it was an important moment. I mean, basically, this is a battle against LIV right now. And I just thought it was a good move, a strategic move, a pragmatic move, and probably a winning move to, really on LIV's own terms, basically say, we have a better product than you, because if you're going to talk about high profile players, we have more of them, and we're going to present them now in a more obvious way. And I think it is an attractive thing to see the best against the best more often. So I think that kind of wins the argument for why they did it. I do think there might be some ramifications going forward where it may not be the very best thing for the highest level of competition, as far as truly making the tournaments the most competitive possible. When it's limited field and there's no cut, and you're cutting out a lot of tour players who on their A game are capable of beating the same guys you're saying are a level above, I think that's a flaw in the premise. But at this moment, I think it's a worthwhile flaw to endure until things shake out a little bit more.
I think that I do think they'll continue to tweak it as they should. A couple things. You and I have had this conversation for years, and I've told you that my word that I've always associated with the World Golf Championship Series, which is dying this week with the conclusion of the match play, it reeked of softness. And I understand that when you want to congregate the best players in the world that are coming from all corners, the idea of 2 days and you're out the door. Look, championship golf, jeopardy is associated with performance. And if there is not jeopardy through 2 days and you are insulating the best players even more, I think it runs counter to what championship golf is. There has to be a price to pay for not being good enough that week. And to play 2 additional days, and whether you make a run or not, and let's say you sneak into the top 20, losing that is part of the essence of what separates you. And that's what separates you from LIV, which is one less round and no cuts. I understand the challenge that LIV has presented, and I also understand the idea of getting these guys together more often. But why not 100 and a cut? And not to mention the ramifications on concessions. You have a smaller field starting at the beginning of the week. You got one wave. You don't have 2 waves. I think there are things, and you can say, "Oh, stop worrying. You don't care about concessions." Well, to some degree, yes, I do. Yes, I do. These are businesses that these people are trying to run. But why not 100 and cut to the low 55 or the low 50? Why not?
No, one of the things that's come out of this is how much it turns out the very best players thought about the cut all the time when they were playing. It was important. It changed the way they played on Thursday and Friday. They wanted to stay in it. This is from Jack Nicklaus on down. And some people, I consider Tiger's closing record after 3rd round leads to be his greatest record, but some consider it the consecutive cut record. And Byron Nelson had it too. Making cuts is not just a skill, but it's an accomplishment. It says something about how good you are, that you can control, your score while not just shooting it at pins, at playing percentages, at playing within yourself at a time when obviously you'd love to shoot as low as you could and get ahead of the field, but you've got to guard against the big number. And that's tournament golf. It's not match play. It's medal play. And so I just feel like Padraig Harrington recently talked about, God, I love the PGA Tour Championship. No cut. I'm so free on the first round. I can just let it go. And it's great. And you do see, look at how Padraig's playing now. It's coincidental, but this distance thing, but he can really let it go the first round. Now, would he do that if he was worried about a cut as much? Probably not. Does that mean the product's not as exciting? I wouldn't say so. I think if you understand what these guys are actually accomplishing and how you have to stay controlled within yourself, there's just greater admiration for pulling it all off. That's kind of nuanced because I think, distance, let's face it, and I don't mean to digress, but distance itself is an attractive, aspect of the game.
Sure.
And it's a skill and it should be rewarded. And one of the misunderstandings about the USGA's and R&A's proposal is that it's going to thwart athleticism. Nothing of the kind. In fact, it probably will, I would say, reward greater athleticism more because the challenge will be slightly greater with a golf ball that makes the game slightly harder. So, that's all missing the point. But as far as the cut, I say restore it just to keep the tension, as you say. That term money grab, you say softness, money grab used to be a cliche that got thrown around with the WGCs. It was never intended that way, and it became that way. The fans perceived it. They would see guys mailing it in after they shot 78 in the first round, and it just took some of the intensity and some of, to me, the challenge and the attraction of the pressure and what has to be overcome at the highest level.
Last thing on this is I understand you and I have had a lot of conversations about all sports. It's essential that the best meet up and meet against each other. And it's a very fickle, expectation in golf because to have these players align with form in the collective, it just doesn't happen that often.
Right.
Getting them together, it certainly helps that equation of it possibly happening more. But one of the chief things that the PGA Tour has trumpeted, and it's been evidence in their acquisition of one tour, whether it be the Canadian Tour, the creation of Latino America, is that these arteries are an indication of the depth of talent that is trying to ascend to the summit, which is the PGA Tour. And stunting, whether it's 20 or 30 players on a weekly basis, you're depriving those individual events of one of the essence of all sports, and that is the door needs to be ajar for the underdog. Got to be there. You've got to allow the Taylor Moores in the back door. You got to allow Eric Cole in the back door. Max Homa doesn't win the Wells Fargo in 2019 for his first win. Playing with Rory on the weekend, he was outside the top 400. Would he have won eventually? Yes. But those things are part of the fabric, not only of professional sports, but the PGA Tour is trumpeted like, look at all these ways that you can make your way there.
They kind of want it both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, 70 to 80. You're not trimming fat, you're trimming elite.
I think it's especially true in golf. When you talk about, sports, you want to leave room for the underdog. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like because of the capricious nature of the game and how hard it is to have your best stuff, so to speak, your A game, it's usually players, playing with somewhat of less than their best and making the most of it, which I guess happens in most sports. But in golf, when somebody does have their best and they happen to be good enough to have a tour card, but maybe aren't a star, they have a better chance than the same, let's say, analogous person in another sport to excel. I mean, I think if you watch the NBA or any sport, you can see why the bench players are the bench players usually. In golf, if somebody's hot and Taylor Moore's hot, he looks like, Steph Curry that week. So I think I maybe not have said it very well, but I think that's what's true about golf is there's just way more variable levels that players reach throughout a season. And the top level is rarely reached by even the best. I mean, even Tiger and Jack said they barely had their A game, maybe 4 times a year. And so everything else is a battle of just making the most of what you've got. And if you happen to be good enough to be out there and you have everything going that week, you will beat a lot of guys who are going to be in the Hall of Fame. And, I think that's kind of more unique in golf.
I mean, Adam Schenk, Adam Schenk was Spiething Spieth.
Right.
And people now have, whether it's a modest affinity or at least an awareness of him, that you're going, I'll be damned. That guy made a 71-footer when Spieth was 14 feet, and it clearly outplayed him on that hole. And you're going, wow, that moment, those moments are not what drive the PGA Tour, but there is an element to that I hope doesn't get lost. Because for the idea that they'll still support these non-designated events, like as evidenced by the Valspar with Spieth and Thomas in the field. I hope so, because it can't be that different.
I would just to throw it out there, but it's so rare. But like Brock Purdy was that kind of a Taylor Moore this year for the 49ers. It turns out he's really good. So, it wasn't like the draft number actually valued him correctly. Or Jeremy Lin in the NBA, had this incredible moment. But I think it's just more part of the fabric of golf, as opposed to those being really rare in the big sport, in the big team sports.
I didn't know you got wrapped up in Linsanity with Jeremy Lin all those years ago. All right, let's finish up with this. Your first Masters, from what I understand, if my memory serves, was 1986. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty good year. Like Jim Nance, pretty good year to be baptized. You on the scribe writing side, and him being thrust into the fray, sitting there on the 16th hole going, "You've got to be kidding me. This is all coming toward me." Why do you think the Masters has become, and I don't think there's any argument here, the most famous golf tournament in the world?
Yes. Well, there's a lot of obvious things, I guess, because it's played on the same course, and we have all now become so familiar with every hole. I mean, I think the Players Championship really benefits from that also. It's not going to be a major because of the closed shop of the four, but I think when you know the golf course that intimately, it just creates a relationship with it. But it just goes back to everything. If you are someone who reads a lot of golf history, I think Bobby Jones's name has some magic, and what he considered to be ideal carries credibility as something that is worthwhile to pursue for everybody. And the way that golf course is set up to reward really exciting shots, talent shots, so to speak, these long shots into the 4.5s, and those are the most exciting shots in golf. And when you see that the greatest players tend to excel in those conditions, it becomes a star driven, without being a designated event or a limited field, it becomes sort of star driven. Somehow the Masters has found the way to, I guess, create the most favorable conditions for the most talented players, has created a winners list that is really impressive and makes you feel like this is the tournament I want to see, because the chances are my favorite player or the best player in the game is going to win it. And that's really hard to say from the U.S. Open and the Open Championship on down. Now, it's a smaller field, and you could say, relatively speaking, it's a limited field, but I think it's more about the style of play and the golf course. And then I would say, I was not the biggest fan of the Masters growing up. Not that I criticized it, but I loved the U.S. Open.
So did
me,
I.
That was the ultimate event.
Yep.
But I have to say, I think in the last 20 years, the Masters, and I think it started with Billy Payne, they have used that collective brain power they have in their membership with all these CEOs and really smart people about how to present a product, and have just taken the best ideas and made it happen in a way that it just is a great show. And I still love the U.S. Open. And I think if I could have won, I could win one championship, it'd be the U.S. Open. But as a show, as a presentation, as a stage, and for the regular golf fan and the casual golf fan and just the general sports fan, it's the best show. And I think that's why it's the most famous.
You mentioned these people, and I think that Billy Payne was absolutely a shift. I think of the chairmans of the club in my lifetime, and I think about them, affectionately, because they seem like, but they were not necessarily, and I mean this respectfully,
Sure.
not necessarily in their prime when it came to whatever business it was that they ran. Whereas Billy Payne had just executed something that not only gave him public cachet, and I'm talking about the '96 Olympics in Atlanta, but this is somebody who had a tremendous amount of acumen as we looked at what was happening with digital distribution and the way that you present things now in sports. So he ushered in an era that was kind of next level as far as how do we present this product globally while not taking away that particular experience of those people on the ground. You're still not coming on the air at 8 o'clock in the morning, television. No, yeah. But we're going to have the damnedest, swiftest, slickest digital product anybody's ever seen. There's no glitches. There's no clumsiness to it. It's brilliant. But yeah. Jaime, the other thing is that whether it's the viewing experience or the on-site experience, and I don't mean that these other tournaments have sold out. They're huge. It comes on at 8 o'clock in the morning. You watch every shot, and that's great. But there's something particular about this event that remains true today. When you're on the property, you're not going to sit there and stay on your phone and take pictures of people standing 5 feet from you. It's a time capsule. It's something that has been lost with virtually every other sporting experience that I've had in my lifetime. They're not going to give it away. And there's incredible value in that. Don't you agree?
I do. It's every great exclusive quality product in the world has an exclusivity to it. And the Masters has retained that. I think they've had it both ways in the best sense, in that they have modernized,
yes,
but they've retained traditions. And they picked the right ones. They picked the right traditions to retain. And they just have had very few missteps. After, I think a very checkered career of missteps in terms of, the formation of the Masters. And, we can all use hindsight to find mistakes, but they have avoided those, and in fact, in some ways, have become, and this is, it could be an oxymoron, but it's sort of cultural leaders in golf, which is important, and I think that's where they've also become more relatable to people who watch sports and go, gee, I admire that product. What they're doing is it's global, it's more socially aware than perhaps golf has been. And you wouldn't necessarily have said that about Augusta National 40 years ago, and now you do.
No, you're right. And I always thought that the Masters felt like, global golf renewal, that in most parts of the United States, you were coming out of the thaw. You were not only thinking about golf, you were actually maybe playing. So they had that inherent advantage in terms of where they fall on the calendar. But with the addition of these amateur events that provide an invitation, whether it be Latin America or the Asia Pacific Amateur Championship, and then you also, now you have kids on the property on a Sunday. You have women there competing on a Saturday. They're touching all points in ways that I think are genuinely impactful. And I'm not here to beat their drum for them. They don't need me to, but they're advancing the game by looking at it. And I used to say, you talk about a closed shop. That was a closed shop in every possible way. And now there's this sense of inclusion. And by the way, I don't think it's accidental that these other clubs, whether it be Seminole hosting a Walker Cup or the clubs that have these drive, chip, and putt regional finals, these are major championship venues. Not on my life or yours would I think that they would have had the impetus or the desire to do any of this, but they feel a sense of responsibility that is being driven by that club to do those things.
I think you're right. And, we know people, the movers and shakers, and a lot of them come from great wealth, but they're responsible wealth. It's like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. Golf has those kind of people within it. And they know how the world's working now in a way that is, I think, it's good business to be socially responsible, basically. And, golf's got a long way to go in that regard.
Yes.
But I do think Augusta has become a leader in that area, and they're being emulated by other clubs, as you said.
Give me a couple Masters tournaments that stand out for you that are not Tiger wins. In your time covering it, 86 doesn't count. It's not a fair fight. Give me a couple that stand out to you that don't maybe get as appreciated as much as they should.
I think I got to have a dark soul when it comes to golf because I just remember the really, devastating defeats. And those are great tournaments, but they're poignant. And I think of Raymond Floyd losing to Nick Faldo in 90. It just hurt me because I was really rooting for Raymond. He was at an age, I think he was 49, 48 then. Maybe, no, he was a little, maybe, but he was, well into his late 40s. And
he was almost 50. He'd already been a Ryder Cup captain.
I don't think he'd turned 50 yet in 80.
No, I said he was almost 50.
Almost 50, yeah. I want to say he was 49. But, he loved that tournament so much. He'd won it before. He played so beautifully. Yep. I always love when an aging veteran just gets the most out of it. And he's pouring all his wisdom into it. And it's harder because, the accumulation of scar tissue creates, more nervousness and more fragility. And he was handling it so perfectly. And Faldo, was kind of this relentless force, and he did that to Greg Norman too. It wasn't always the romantic, force, but it was just pure golf. And Raymond just made a couple of little mistakes at the end. And even courageously, I remember he hit it in the bunker on the drive on 18 after he kind of lost the lead. And then he hit it in the bunker on green side, and he still got it up and down to get into the playoff. And it was just guts. And yet it fell short. It was kind of like the old man in the sea. It was just sad. But I just remember those really well. I mean, I remember Scott Hoke too. Both of those are Nick Faldo victories. But I also remember Nick playing perfect golf on Sunday against Norman. And that gets lost sometimes. That 67 was just airtight. Obviously, Greg lost it going, he lost the thread, so to speak, and it happens. And that was sad. But I I think there's a triumph too in just holding it together when there's just no room for error. And that was almost perfect golf. So, I mean, you could pick any one, probably we'd find something, really, compelling about them, but those kind of stand out to me. And I'm a Raymond Floyd fan. The way he played, it wasn't beautiful, but it was just so sophisticated.
Yeah, no doubt. Again, he had been the Ryder Cup captain in '89.
Yeah.
I mean, and here he is the next year. And then he was on the Ryder Cup team in 1991. All right, let me get you out of here very quickly. Who's the best storyteller in your career in a media center?
Oh, gosh. Probably Tom Callahan.
Okay.
Tom Callahan, I was very fortunate to work at Golf Digest, and Jerry Tardy is just a great, he's a impresario. He's a great Hollywood producer. He brings people together. He would bring these round tables at the rented house at the Masters for dinners, but it would be Charlie Price, Herb Wind, Alistair Cook one night. I mean, Dan Jenkins, Dave Anderson. It was just amazing. And for someone young in the business like me at the time, it was such a moment. I didn't say anything. But the guy who would take the room over very often was Tom Callahan. And he verbally, such an incredible writer. I'm just poetic, but very concise. But his stories would meander. He just had that gift, that Irish gift of just holding a room.
I'm going to end it with this because I don't know the answer to this. The golf course you haven't played yet that you want to.
Oh, I'd like to play Fisher's Island. I've never played there.
Très bien. Very, very good.
But, I've been it's not like I feel so rich. I haven't played a lot. I haven't played as many as you have, obviously. But I don't know. It doesn't matter. I feel like I've had so many rich experiences at so many golf courses, and I'm not got to collect them. But I haven't played Muirfield. I haven't played Sunningdale. I'd like to play those.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you as always for your thoughts. I hope that you and I will get to spend some time together at the Masters. If you're not running around with papers falling out of your briefcase, trying to chase another story. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Great pleasure.
Really appreciate Jaime Diaz taking the time. Every conversation I have with him, I learned something. He's a great friend and one of the great minds in the game of golf. A reminder, next week, a Masters preview with me, Johnson Wagner, and we're adding Brendan DeYoung to the fold as well. Have a great week, everybody.